hearing on House Bill 1472, and we also have amendment number 1416S to House Bill 1472. And I recognize Senator Bradley to introduce the amendment.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for the graciousness, and to the sponsor for the graciousness of allowing me to jump in. I have a 10 o'clock upstairs that I have to introduce also. So Senator Morse asked me to introduce Amendment 1416 to House Bill 1472. Senator Morse is at the funeral of Stuart Lamprey, a former Senate President, which is why I'm sitting in for him. Madam Chair, members of the ED&A Committee, thank you for the opportunity to present this amendment for consideration. Having missed deadlines to file legislation in the House, I was approached by representatives who are also Derry town councilors asking if I could bring in the amendment on a local issue. I said to them I'd be willing to bring in an amendment forward to debate upon a favorable vote by Derry. And as you can see, this question was the first question on the ballot in Derry. After having a successful approved vote in Derry of the non-binding question in the local election, they worked with my staff and the New Hampshire Municipal Association to draft the amendment. It is a local issue and must be considered and debated with input from the Derry Town Council, Senator Chuck Morse. So that's what the amendment is about. It just allows the will of Derry voters to incorporate their school district as a department of the town. So thank you, Madam Chair. I'm doing my job for Senator Morse. Happy to answer any questions later, but I'd like to get upstairs and let Representative McKay introduce her bill. And again, thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you very much, Senator Bradley. The chair will call Representative McKay.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Representative Mary Ellen McKay. I represent Hillsborough District 30, Nashua Ward 3. And I'm here to introduce House Bill 1472. I'm a member of the BCRB, and I sit on the Building Code Review Board as the representative of the Governor's Commission on Disability. And in that capacity, the Building Code Review Board asked if I would bring forward this legislation to repeal RSA 155:D. This RSA came about because New Hampshire is pretty forward-thinking. And we were the first state to adopt this type of legislation. However, in 2009, we adopted the ECC, the Energy Conservation Code, which then rendered this piece of legislation, or this RSA, moot, because it is exactly the same thing. And because the legislature would like to do away with redundant and out-of-date statutes, we brought forward this legislation. I worked with the Building Code Review Board. I worked with Nashua's Building Code Inspector to develop this piece of legislation because, quite frankly, our fault interrupters and I don't know a thing about each other. So it's not my bailiwick. Individuals with disabilities, however, is. So we're bringing this legislation in hopes that we will reduce excess statutes, be in compliance with the 2009 ECC, and work to be more efficient in the state. And if you have any questions of a technical nature, I'm going to refer them to the people behind me, such as Chris Scoglin, who I also worked with. And the piece in this bill that is important is working with Steve Ekberg from the PUC. There's a form in here, and as they described it to me, because I really don't understand, the res check would be like a long form and a short form tax refund or tax statement. The short form would be this form that the PUC does. That would be the 1049. And what it does is allow the same inspections to happen, only at a reduced time frame. And so we wanted the PUC to still be involved. We wanted the PUC still on the BCRB. And so we added that into this legislation so that we do away with the statute, but keep the membership on the BCRB because the PUC is important. And again, to that piece, Bill McKinney, Chris Goblin are behind me. They can answer that.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony, Representative. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. The chair will call Chris Goblin. Hold on a second. Representative Runt, did you want to testify?
No, ma'am.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Thank you.
So,
Madam Chair.
Mr. Scoglin, please come forward.
Sir.
Chair Carson and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to comment on HB 1472 relative to the State Building Code Review Board for energy conservation and new construction. My name is Chris Goglin. I'm the Climate and Energy Program Manager in the Air Resource Division at the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. Previously not well known, unfortunately, you have outed me and my existence. As the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services is supportive of efforts to simplify the regulatory environment and reduce the administrative burden on all parties, New Hampshire DES supports this bill. The State Building Energy Code, as defined by RSA 155A1, is intended to ensure that New Hampshire homes and businesses meet a minimum level of energy efficiency. New Hampshire homes and businesses need to be safe and comfortable spaces across a wide variety of weather conditions during all 4 seasons, as this year has well illustrated, and constructing energy-efficient homes is the most cost-effective means to achieve this outcome. This bill seeks to clarify the administration of the State Building Code by repealing the entirety of 155D, Energy Conservation in Buildings, which was first adopted in 1979. The important parts, or the new energy code, was subsequently adopted, 155A, in 2002. And this bill transfers the necessary administrative provisions of 155D that Representative McKay alluded to 155A. Therefore, this bill serves to simplify overlapping statutes. At this time, and looking at the number of people that are here for other bills, I'll pause, and if there are any questions, I can take them.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Okay, are there any other members of the public that would like to speak to House Bill 1472? We're not talking about the amendment, because that's next, but the actual 1472. Sir, you are?
I'm William McKinney with the Hampshire Building Officials.
Okay, you want to come forward?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm William McKinney with the New Hampshire Building Officials Association, speaking in support of the original Bill 1472. The legislation we're hoping to repeal at this point is RSA 155D, and that was the original New Hampshire Energy Code before the adoption of the international codes, and RSA 155D is severely outdated. 155D became obsolete when the International Energy Code and International Residential Codes were adopted as part of the State Building Code. House Bill 1472 maintains the very popular New Hampshire EC1 form, along with other compliance options such as ResCheck and ComCheck. Also, the statement by the licensed design professionals are still recognized under this legislation. Repealing RSA 155D removes the often misused or misinterpreted 50% renovation rule that has plagued attempts at updating building code adoption for the past several years. New Hampshire Building Officials Association supports House Bill 1472 as it helps to eliminate unnecessary legislation. And with that, I will be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing on this portion of House Bill 1472. And because the time is, we've gone over the time, we're going to start hearing from folks who want to speak to the amendment which is 1416S. Senator Bradley has already introduced that, so we're gonna just go over a couple of things. There's quite a few people here who want to speak on this bill. What I'm going to ask you is please do not read your testimony and try to paraphrase it as best as you can. Secondly, we're interested in hearing new things. So if you're going to come up and testify, we want new information. Please don't repeat information that we've already been given. We do need to keep to a schedule here today. We do have to be out of this room by noon. So we want to make sure that every person who's here that wants to testify has an opportunity to do so. Okay, I'm going to recognize Representative Senator Birdsall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee. I'm here for Amendment 1472, but I'm not here to speak for or against it. I'm just here to give you a cautionary tale that as the legislature, do we want to really be weighing in on what I perceive as local issues? I have in the past and in the future, I try and leave the local issues as local and let them work it out. I would prefer that the chair deem this amendment as non-germane, but if that doesn't happen, I want to make sure that if we take this up, we could very feasibly start an avalanche of towns that are unhappy with the spending that's happening in their local school boards and put non-binding referendums on the ballot and then move legislation. That is my fear. I've heard from a number of citizens who did not vote for the article, but they do not feel that this is the way to be handled. I know you all have received an email from Attorney Gordon Graham. I'll let you read his letter on his own, and he shares many of my concerns. One, this being precedent, and another, the non-binding question. If you do go forward with this process, you need to make sure that the citizens of Derry are made a part of the process and are eligible to vote on it. And with that, I will conclude my testimony, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Senator. Are there any questions for Senator Birdsall? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the chair will call Carol McGuire. Representative McGuire. Okay, I'm there. Okay. The chair will call Representative Saporetto.
He's at a hearing.
He is in a hearing, okay. The chair will call Representative Churchill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, Representative Chiricello from Derry, District 6. I did bring out some handouts for everybody. Should I pass them along this way? How many will I need? 5?
6.
I think there's 7 there.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So what I brought you, first off, is the Derry Town Charter. It's very lengthy, but you'll be able to take a look and see how our form of government operates. Derry's unique in the fact that we already basically operate the town side now. Town side and then school side are separate entities. The town side already operates as a city. We have 7 town councilors. We have the end-all, be-all with budgets on the town side. And we basically operate just like any alderman in Manchester or Nashua. So I did bring you the full charter so you can actually review that. So the question that Senator Birdsall brought up about maybe setting precedent, I don't see that because we're very unique in the way that we operate today. And this would be a natural progression if we did bring the schools under the town and under the tax cap. Secondly, I would like to, you've got in your packet the March ballot, where we put a question on the ballot. We don't need to, but we did this time around. We wanted to ask the citizens what their thoughts were on doing this. And as you can see, it did pass by 53%. It was a snowstorm, but the people that wanted to show up to make a statement did make a statement. And as you see the question, it basically says, are you in favor of petitioning the state legislature to obtain authorization? That's what we're here for today. If you were to approve this amendment, what it basically does is it's enabling legislation, so it's just going to allow us to move forward in that discussion. The citizens of Derry will have a say, and that would probably be next March. So we've got plenty of time. If this was to prevail, we have plenty of time to discuss all the ins and outs, the pros and cons of doing this, and then we would like the people to have their final say as to whether they want to do this or not. So, I mean, it's as simple as that. I'll answer any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you very much for your testimony. If you have any questions? Representative, I'm looking at the question, and I think it's very clear because it's asking, are you in favor of petitioning the state legislature to obtain authorization? And what was the number again?
So, Senator, yes, it's the number of yes was 597. The number of no was 547. You know, you'll hear testimony that it was a very snowy day. It was a snowy day across the state. My feeling is if it was a regular election without the weather, and this is a personal opinion of mine, the yes vote would have been higher. But that's my personal opinion.
Was this vote ratified?
When you say
So I
ratified,
mean, that there were no problems with any of the procedure, there was no complaints about that there was a problem at any of your polling places or anything like that?
as far as I'm aware of, I didn't hear any, but I'm not, you know, I don't get the complaints, so I wouldn't know. I didn't hear anything. So, and then we discussed this prior. The town council discussed putting this ballot question on and how it would be, how we perceived the process would be. We discussed that, so people knew.
So it was also publicized in the Derry News and other local places. Was it discussed? I'm sure. Were there any programs on local cable access?
Yes, Senator, we did. Our town administrator, who will be testifying, he actually did a public access TV show and kind of laid out the process. So we did. Most people that knew that it was a non-binding question and that we would ask them that exact question. So they had plenty of advance warning and notice. Yeah.
Are there any further questions? Senator Gannon?
This doesn't include Pinkerton, right? Does not.
It does. However, Pinkerton is, it's a semi-private institute, yeah. So there's a contract that the school board enters into. I believe right now, we may be in a, and I don't know for this for a fact, but we may be in a 5-year contract now, or we just renewed or amended something, but it would fall under that.
Okay. Okay, are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Representative. The chair will call Representative Dowling. Representative Katsouras, did you also want to speak?
No.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. For the record, I am Representative Patricia Dowling from Derry, New Hampshire. I have, Senator Carson, a similar that you have, but with a few asterisks to it. Would you mind if I passed, we pass that out? Thank you very much.
Please have a seat.
Thank you. I filed that I was against this. However, I want you to know personally, I voted for it. So it's not that this is carte blanche, we shouldn't do this, blah, 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 blah. If you read this asterisk, it says non-binding question. That meant to me, it's a survey. That's what it meant to most people, that it was a survey that we would discuss further if the survey won. Not that this whole process was going to occur. So please understand, because that's the way I understood. Also, Secondly, I do not know what the rush is. Because going to the legislature, since I've been there for 10 terms, seems to me it's a House bill, gonna go through the House, we're gonna have our hearings on it, it's gonna come here if it passes, and we will air this whole thing one way or another. We are circumventing that because time doesn't allow it, and we're trying to do this fast, but I don't know why we're trying to do this fast. But we're trying to do this fast. The third thing that I want to mention is I don't know of any other town that would have this form of government in the state. We are a town, but we're going to be acting like a city as far as the school is concerned. I think that I call it a mongrel, but I'm sure there would be a very much nicer term for it. But that is what we are going to be. We'd be one of a kind. So I think that that's it. I don't want to belabor the point. I would love more time to be able to go through this, and I thank you today for your time.
Thank you very much, Representative. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. The chair will call Representative Willis.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for taking my testimony. I am Representative Brenda Willis from Derry. I also am a member of the Derry School Board and a very active volunteer, a member of the last Charter Commission for the town of Derry. I am here to ask you to defeat the non-germane amendment to House Bill 1472. I, along with many Derry voters, am deeply disappointed and quite honestly shocked that this amendment was submitted without prior contact with the Derry Town Council. The Town Council placed a non-binding referendum question on the ballot in March. Shouldn't they be aware of legislation when it is moving forward? Our Town Council chairman advised me that he was unaware of this and would be researching it to get answers. I feel this is wrong. Derry has 5 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, a preschool program that serves our special needs preschoolers required by federal law, and a charter school. The majority of our high school students are tuitioned to Pinkerton Academy. Sorry, I fell yesterday. I was up a lot last night with after being seen for the injury, so a little shaky, and I'm sorry. We are the 3rd largest school district in the state. The residents of Derry have many opportunities to be part of the budget process and to be heard. We have a Citizen Fiscal Advisory Committee that works for several months alongside with the school board administration to develop a budget that serves our students and is fiscally responsible to the taxpayers. These meetings are open to the public, televised, and are also posted on our website. Once the fiscal advisory process is complete, we hold public hearings, a deliberative session, and then voters go to the polls. On the town side, 7 councilors decide the budget and town contracts. Voters only have a say when voting for those 7 individuals. You should be aware, in the March 2008 election, the school budget passed 850 to 293. The food service worker contract passed 838 to 317, while the non-binding referendum passed 597 to 547. The amendment does not include any process for the town council to follow. How will the school district be incorporated in the town immediately, as it is written in the amendment? What will happen to school employees, transportation, oil, and Pinkerton Academy contracts, just to name a few? What will happen to our children? Having served on the Charter Commission, I'm questioning why the town charter, the governing documents of our town, voted on by the Derry voters, is being ignored, and special legislation added to an energy conservation bill, a building code bill, to allow the town to incorporate the school district is being considered. It doesn't make good sense, it is not a good practice, and it is poor legislation unrelated to the bill. Please do what is right and fair and defeat the amendment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Representative. Are there any questions from Representative Willis? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Tripp, did you wish to speak?
No, thank you.
Okay, we're gonna just go through the rest of the folks here. We'll start with Dave Carey.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Dave Karen. I'm the Town Administrator for the Town of Derry. I'm here today to speak in favor of an amendment to HB 1472, which would allow Derry voters to consider whether to incorporate the school district as a department of the town. Derry is the 4th largest community in the state and the largest town in the state. Our town government has operated under a town council form of government since 1984. With Durham, Derry is one of only 2 towns in New Hampshire whose governmental structure parallels a city under RSA 49D Roman 2I. Our town council has been empowered by our voters through our charter to exercise powers of both the governing and legislative body, including the adoption of the annual budget. With this structure and administrative and organizational capacity in place, the town is well positioned to continue to deliver quality and efficient services to our citizens on a scale and complexity which is the same or exceeds that found in New Hampshire cities. Derry has operated under a tax cap since 1993. The town's charter allows an adjustment of the town portion of the tax rate to reflect the change in the Northeast Consumer Price Index as published by the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics. Since 2010, the annual change in the CPI has ranged from 0.4% to 3%, with a median annual adjustment of 1.6. Last year, our taxpayers experienced an overall increase in the community tax rate of 6.6%. The town's rate increased by 1.7. The local school rate increased 10.4. I am not here today to be critical of our school district, but to provide background as to why many taxpayers approach town council members to express their dismay at the increase in taxes, with many advocating the inclusion of the school under a tax cap. Recognizing the possible fundamental change in the school budget process, the council, in accordance with our charter, opted to place a non-binding referendum question before the voters, which you have before you. The measure passed with 52% of the vote. The council believes there is sufficient interest and support in the idea to continue the discussion with Derry voters. Meaningful discussion cannot occur without passage of this bill. No communities in New Hampshire can include the school district as a department of the town without state legislative approval. That was made clear by the Supreme Court in a case between the Manchester School District and the city of Manchester back in around the turn of the century, in which as I understand it, the mayor and aldermen attempted to proceed without legislative approval. It was passed by the voters, and then there was litigation. The Supreme Court made it very clear where we have to receive permission from the legislature to have this discussion at the local level. Therefore, once the Supreme Court decision was made, then the city had to retroactively return or approach the legislature in order to receive approval. Although our council has not discussed in depth how a charter amendment may be crafted, however, based upon the language of this bill and examples from our neighbors, it is anticipated that the structure would parallel that found in many city charters. The town council, as legislative body, would hear testimony from the school board and superintendent on their proposed budget. The council would vote on a bottom line budget, which would then be administered and managed by the school board and superintendent. Passage of this bill during this legislative session will allow adequate time for a robust community discussion at the local level, as state statute restricts the consideration of charter amendments to the regular municipal election, which is next scheduled for March 12, 2019. So in summary, we're requesting permission to continue the discussion with our voters. At some point in the next 8 months, the council will make a decision whether to place it before the voters. It has to go before the voters pursuant to our state constitution. Article 29 of Part 1 of our Constitution is very clear. The legislature cannot on its own make changes in the form of government or to charters at the local level unless it's approved by the local voters. So the process would be, if we receive permission from the legislature, a robust community discussion will continue, and the council will make some determination between now and March whether to place this item before the voters. I appreciate the opportunity to testify on HB 1472 and would entertain any of your questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions for Mr. Carey? Senator Gannon.
Thank you for taking my question. How do you feel as someone who didn't have, I don't have a dog in the hunt here, or in the game, but
Well, nor do I, actually.
non-binding. that really, as people have pointed out before, makes me think, just like they did if you read the plain language, that it was only gonna be a survey that wasn't gonna go further. That's the way I look at it. That really does, if you read plain language,
Sure.
that's what they try to teach us to do in law school, I would say that this wasn't going any further.
Well, if it was non-binding means actually it's not binding upon the voters, obviously. If the council could have proposed a charter amendment and have gone to the legislature without, they want an indication of the preferences of the community. And I don't think anybody would agree that 52% is a mandate to make a change. But I think people will be hard pressed to argue that 52% is not a mandate to continue the discussion. So what we're simply asking for is for, as required by the state Supreme Court and the state legislature, is to receive permission to return to the local voters to continue this discussion, and it may eventually end up before the voters. That needs to be determined by the town council as the discussion progresses.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
The chair will call Daniel McKenna.
Thank you, Senator, members of the committee. My name is Daniel McKenna. I'm a resident of Derry, and I'm also currently on the school board. And Senator Carson, I want to thank you for making sure this amendment was on the agenda. I don't know if that's general practice to put amendments on the agenda, but without that, we wouldn't have known this hearing was happening today. And with apologies to Simon and Garfunkel, I think we need to slow down. We go too fast. We got to make sure this legislation lasts. As the senator who introduced, Senator Bradley, when he introduced the bill, said this is a Derry issue. And I agree with him in large part that this is a Derry issue. But Derry hasn't been involved in this process in terms of crafting this legislation. Last night we had a town council meeting, which is the first time the town council has discussed this legislation or this non-binding referendum since this vote. In fact, last week, our state reps, or maybe 2 weeks ago, our state reps, our town council, and our school board got together to discuss legislative issues, and this issue wasn't raised. Our town council chair said last night that he found out that the wording had, I apologize, the town council chair said last night that it was never the intention of this council for this language to be introduced last Thursday, and every one of us, referring to the town council, was just as surprised as you were out there to find this out. Senator Chiricello said, Representative Chiricello said last night that he found out Thursday he said, I found out that wording had already been drafted, which I was quite amazed. I didn't realize Senator Morris had done something. I hadn't heard anything. There's unanswered questions about this wording, and frankly, this is wording that should be coming from the town of Derry, and legislation that should be coming from the town of Derry. And we in Derry haven't had an opportunity to vet this language and haven't had an opportunity to talk about this language. I'll try not to repeat things, but I'd like to draw your attention to the wording of that non-binding referendum. And what we haven't talked about is the second half of the non-binding referendum, which specifically says that there would be a process to amend the town charter, or a vote to amend the town charter. The amendment that's been put forward, HB1472, does not currently say anything about a process, what process would have to be taken. It says the town of Derry may incorporate the school district as a department, and then it continues. Under the town charter, section 5.1, the town council has the authority to take any actions authorized by state law. I think it's based on this language, the town council could have a good case that they could incorporate the school district without a vote of the people, without amending the town charter, as the non-binding referendum referred to. Unlike some city town charters, our town charter does not specifically name or delineate any departments. And while Representative Chiricello, I keep trying to make you a senator, Representative Chiricello has said we act like a city, we're not a city. And this is a big and a very important distinction, I think, that we haven't talked about yet. This language that's in front of you, the amendment language, mirrors the language from 2003 that Manchester used when Manchester was taking actions to incorporate their school district. And I won't presume to tell you about that process or how that process worked, but there's a number of differences. One, Manchester had already had a binding charter amendment voted on in 2001 before this legislation came through in 2003. And second, as was mentioned, that case did go to the New Hampshire Supreme Court. And the New Hampshire Supreme Court basically says that, yes, the state can pass legislation to allow cities to incorporate school districts as departments, and cited to two specific parts of language. One, the language RSA 49C, which pertains to cities. Derry operates as a municipality under 49D. 49D does not have that same language about departments that is in 49C. Also, RSA 198.4B has to do with funding and contingency funds for school districts and school districts that are independent or administered by a city. There's no language in there about school districts that are underseen or overseen by a town. So why does this matter? There's other changes that I think will need to be made in the state code. My guess is that this committee doesn't have time to start doing that lifting to look at what other changes need to be made before your deadline's in 20 days or 19 days. While we act like a city, we're not a city. And to highlight that, when this process was first rolled out at a town council meeting, the town council was given two options. One, we could proceed in a path that would lead us towards becoming a city, and we can do this. Or two, we can take an option and not be a city. And the town council picked the path to do this without becoming a city. So while we may act like a city, we're not a city, and the town council's expressed, through that vote at least, that they don't want to be a city. So I think it's important because there may be unintended consequences of this legislation for us, but also for other towns in the future. While this is a Derry issue and a Derry bill right now, if we open up this door and we're carving out special exceptions, I agree with Senator Birdsell that you're likely to have other towns coming forward. And if you're going to go through that process, let's make sure we do it right and look at the provisions in state law 49D on municipal and town charters as opposed to city charters, on funding provisions. There's a lot we don't know. Unlike Manchester in 2001, there has been no proposed charter amendment yet. So while the council said they intend to amend the charter, one, we don't know if they have to, and two, we don't know what that would look like. So what other special exemptions would we need? There's a lot to this. It looks like a short bill with small language, but there's a lot there. And Senator, with respect to Pinkerton, we currently have a 20-year contract with Pinkerton Academy. Pinkerton would not be subject to the tax cap. They give us their tuition just like they do with Hampstead and Chester and Fremont and Auburn and Hooksett. So the school district would be subject to the tax cap, but Pinkerton on its own would not be subject to that tax cap. If anyone else has any other questions, I'm happy to try to answer those, but I think there's a lot to this. There's more that meets the eye, and we need to be really careful. The town can study this and bring this back next January and ask, say we vetted this now and we want to send it through so we can still do something by March. Give Derry a chance to look at this language and give us a chance to understand what the other consequences might be for ourselves and other communities in terms of making sure our charter works and making sure we don't end up in the Supreme Court or wherever else arguing what Derry does not have the power to do. There is a clearer path. We could become a city. We haven't taken that path. It was expressed that we don't want to go that path, but if we're going to keep creating a hybrid that's nowhere else in the state legislature and that 49D doesn't anticipate and doesn't discuss and use those powers, we should make sure we do it right. So I'd encourage you to not pass this amendment and give us some time to work it out in Derry before we ask the legislature to do something which Derry may or may not then act on.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions? Mr. McKenna, I have a couple of questions. We've heard testimony that the people were notified that there had been articles in the local paper, their cable access show, town council talked about this for a period of time. So I do believe that the people were made aware of this particular issue. What I find concerning is that even though 52% of the vote was in favor, the people did vote. They came out to vote, and they voted for this issue. And you're asking us to ignore the vote of the people of the town of Derry, which I think is very, very serious. Some of us strongly believe in local control, and this is local control. This is an article that was put on your ballot, and people voted for it. They had an opportunity to say yes or no, and the majority of the people said yes. And that's why we have this amendment here. And the way that I'm looking at it, it says, are you in favor of petitioning the state legislature to obtain authorization to include the school district as a department of the town? That's very clear. So when a voter went into the voting booth and read that, that's again, very, very, very clear. And then it goes on to say, and if so authorized, so if we pass this, seek Derry voter approval through an amendment to the town charter. There are established procedures for having an amendment to a town charter. Usually it includes forming a charter commission, individuals that are elected by the public through a municipal election, and they go through and they make changes, they make recommendations to the body as a whole to put that in front of the voters. So again, this is a process that constantly needs input from the voters of the town of Derry. And then, and it was very, very clearly stated here, passage would result in the requirement that the school department comply with the voter-approved tax cap. I don't see anything here that's unclear. I think that there was, from what the testimony we've heard, there was a period of time that people were educated about this. This was not something that was slipped in at the last minute and nobody knew about it. People knew about it, people spoke. My question to you is, you're coming to us, or the town of Derry is coming to us and asking us to allow this process to go forward because 597 people voted for it. And you're asking us to ignore the will of the people who came out to vote on this issue. Do you believe that that's appropriate?
Senator, I disagree with your interpretation of the question. I think that the question does state non-binding and says, shall there be a petition to the state legislature? That in itself says that non-binding, that doesn't mean if this passes, we're automatically going to go to the state legislature. It means, shall we consider this issue and think about moving forward with going to the state legislature? Since this vote that's happened, there hasn't been a public discussion about this bill until very briefly last night, where a number of people on the council said they didn't know anything about it until this weekend, and we don't have a lot of information. I think I'm not asking you to just kill this and never come back to it. What I'm saying is that we need to talk about it in Derry, and we need to consider it. And the language in that question specifically says that there would be a process to amend the town charter. Based on this language that's in front of us, there's no requirement. This language does not spell out any process or any requirement that the town charter be amended. Our current town charter does not list any department. There is no department listed in our town charter because town charters aren't. They're in the town code because we're a municipal charter as opposed to those city charters. So we need to look at the process. Our current town council may intend to do a vote at some point in the future of the people. And I'm not saying they don't. But if this legislation passes, if our current town council doesn't take action or the vote fails, there's nothing to stop the next town council from trying to incorporate the school district as a department without a vote of the people. So at the very least, we need to amend this bill to make it clear that there's going to be a process and a charter amendment would be required.
I don't want to be argumentative with you, Mr. McKenna, but I find it hard to believe that 597 people voted for this and they didn't know what they were voting for.
I think they did know what they were voting for, Senator. They thought this was going to be a process. And right now, this bill this amendment does not reflect what that process said it was going to be. And we haven't had that discussion in town. This was a non-binding referendum. It was something for the town council to consider and was widely promoted as the town council as gauging the feelings of the public. So we should have that conversation. We have over 30,000 people in Derry. I don't dispute that this was an election and these are the people that showed up. And we know voter turnout's low. But to say that the will of the people is clear on a non-binding question, I don't think that's so open and shut. There should be a discussion that happens in Derry, and what I'm asking, Senator, is that you give us time to do that, and let our town council petition the legislature in January.
But my question to you has been, there has been no discussion on this. None whatsoever. That is what you were telling us.
That's correct.
That the town never discussed this non-binding question.
Not since the vote occurred.
Okay, but prior to the vote, I'm asking you prior to the vote, was there any discussion within the town of Derry on this proposed non-binding amendment?
Yes.
Okay, was it explained to the people what non-binding meant?
Yes, a non-binding means that something may or may not happen.
Okay, so the point is, the majority of the people voted for this, okay? Whether you agree that it was a snowy day and not a lot of people came out, they still voted for this. And so this is moving the process forward. There might be some discussion about how that process moves forward. You believe in, from what I'm taking from your testimony, is that, okay, well, we approved this, but now we should start discussing how we're going to approach the legislature. Senator Morse was approached by citizens of Derry to put this in. That's why we have this today. So I don't know what other process you want to go through, because again, there's already been a discussion about this. And I see people are starting to get hung up on the non-binding. If you want to call it a survey, Mr. McKenna, okay, fine, it was a survey. And the survey said, yeah, this is a good idea, let's move forward. So I'm just very, very concerned. A vote of the people of the town of Derry was taken on this issue. And you've come here today to ask us to overrule the people of the town of Derry that voted for this. And I find it troubling. I don't see this as, this is the end of the process. In fact, I see this as the beginning of the process. That if this passes, the town of Derry is going to engage with the voters. And I think you used the term robust. There, I think, is going to be some really good discussions about whether or not you're going to do this. And at the end of the day, the people of the town of Derry are going to vote. I just don't want to disenfranchise the 597 people who came out to vote and who voted in favor of this.
Senator Carson, if I may.
Sure.
I think that the piece of that amendment or that non-binding referendum that you're leaving out is the most important to me, that there would be a vote to amend the town charter. Under this legislation you've put forward, that has been put forward, not you, but that has been put forward, there's nothing that would require an amendment to the town charter. And Derry is different than all the cities that have done this prior. And that's why 49C and the difference between RSA 49C and 49D are different, because 49C, as you know, pertains to city charters and D to town and municipal charters. But Derry still operates under that town charter. My concern is this language, which carves out a unique exception for the town of Derry and authorizes the town to do something. In our town charter, which you have in front of you, section 5.1 says the town council can take any action authorized by the state legislature, that this language does not meet what the expectation of that referendum was, and that it doesn't lay out a process. And we should make sure that the process is laid out, and we should make sure that all of the statutes that need to be amended are amended, rather than doing this in a rush. I'm not asking you to never revisit this again. Please just give us and Derry time to discuss this and bring it back in January so that it can be corrected.
And thank you again for your comments. You know, I find it hard to believe that you didn't talk, the town of Derry didn't talk about any of this. So, I don't mean to be argumentative with you, but I do think that there's some really big issues here.
And I will yield to the next person, but Senator,
Yes.
there was never discussion in Derry about the language of the legislation. There was never, so this language or any other language, and as far as I know, our town councilor said last night they had never seen the language until last Thursday.
Okay.
So I think that's part of the difference, is the legislation and the language of the legislation is important.
Okay, and I will tell you that if your town council saw this last Thursday, I never received any email from your town council either saying yes or no. So
So give us time to do that.
okay, thank you. The chair will call Tom Carden. Good morning, Mr. Carden.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for the opportunity to speak on this. I've been a town resident for 28 years. I am a former high school teacher of 34 years, a former state representative, and former chairman of the Derry Town Council. Back in 1993, I was involved with a group of taxpayers that initiated a tax cap for the town of Derry. And at that point, there were a lot of naysayers that said that it wasn't going to work, that there'd be lots of trouble, and it has worked remarkably well over the years. I've actually been pretty impressed. You know, the council have to budget their money. It prevents up and down spikes in the in the tax cap, and it also, again, it makes the town councilors focus on a budget. I mean, they have to budget just like everybody else does. In this room, we all have our own personal finances that we have to budget. And this came about because of the frustration from from a lot of taxpayers. And there has been a lot of discussion about this at the town council. I attend all the town council meetings. I was there in December, January, February, and in some of those meetings they talked about this. So it's been out there. It's been out there for the voters. And one of the things that I look at here is that because we work under the Consumer Price Index, the Northeast Consumer Price Index, that means that based on their $87 million budget this year, if it was 1.7%, which it was this year, that would still mean an increase of more than $1.5 million for the school budget. And I think that is enough money for them to operate. And it's going to be a learning curve for them because they're going to have to learn to work with the budget. But I don't think it's anything that they can't do. As everybody said, this is just the first step in the process. And I think the most important part of this is that this is all going to go back to the voters, and they're going to have the ultimate say on this. And just to talk a little bit about the recent election, I honestly thought this was going to go down in flames. I didn't ever expect this to pass, and the fact that it passed during a major snowstorm in Derry was very impressive. So I do hope you support this bill. And thank you very much, Senators.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brennan. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. The chair will call Derek Anderson.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to submit testimony today. My name is Derek Anderson. I'm a resident of Derry, a taxpayer, father of children in our school district, and a member of the Derry School Board. I join you today to ask you to reject this amendment. Our town did pass a non-binding question. We've all spoken about the language. I'm not going to get into that. We know about the proposed amendment language, and I'd like to focus in on some of those details. The amendment, I believe, should be rejected on two grounds. The first is that it's a non-germane amendment. Senate Rules Part 3, Rule 17 states, an amendment to a bill or resolution is germane if the subject matter of the amendment is the same as that of some portion of the bill or resolution. I think we can all agree that it does not. I am a pharmacist and in one of the most heavily regulated professions in this country, and rules are rules that we need to follow. If I don't follow any single rule, no matter how silly it may be, I could lose my license. The second portion of my testimony it's a non-binding question. Mr. Karen spoke about the New Hampshire Constitution, and that portion that he left out, that changes in a town and city charter shall only be enacted by a legislature except to become effective upon the approval of the voters. The amendment states that it becomes effective immediately, so already we're off target here. The voters have not voted on this. This is a non-binding question. Whether you want to call it a referendum, a question, a survey, whatever it is, there was no actual vote that would set forth a charter amendment. The second part of that is the approval of the voters of such city or town upon referendum to be provided for in said law. This amendment does not speak for a referendum offered. It should be agreeable that a process that would fundamentally change the structure of government in the town would be as clear and transparent as possible. We've already had one person from our town say that they didn't think this is what they were voting for, this process. They knew the language of the non-binding question is fine. People didn't understand this process. I have a person very close to me in the town that voted for it because they wanted to support the town, didn't understand that this was going to be the process. So that's 2 people, 597 won it. There's a big difference between 2 and 597. There's not much difference between those 2 numbers and 30,000 in Derry. 2 weeks ago, the Derry Town Council, the school board, and legislative delegation all met to move forward, as Mr. McKenna spoke about, to discuss how the town can come together to cohesively discuss our budget questions. No one brought up the idea of a proposed amendment that would be issued this quickly. You think that that would be something that they would want to do? Hey, we're going to talk about how to make this town better, get the budget straightened out. We have this amendment. Let's go over the language together. All 3 of our parties are here. It was a great meeting. Everyone walked away from that thinking we're moving forward on solid ground. And then this gets thrown into a construction bill of some sort a week later. Please reject this amendment until the time the Derry legislative delegation may itself introduce properly worded legislation that is transparent to the voters. Furthermore, the legislation should have a sunset provision. You could see how this could go crazy. This gets passed and the town comes out and says no this year, then next year someone comes back and brings it up and keeps going forward. There needs to be something in there that happens. I think it's a hastily put together language. We don't need to work this fast. Many people have spoken to that. And I think one other analogy works is we've had a couple of our town members come up and say that Derry is already like a city. So the only thing I can correspond that to is medication, because I'm a pharmacist. So there could be 2 medicines that are very like each other. One could kill you. So let's settle down, look at this, go through a proper process, not one night that the town got to see. We had a town council meeting that was hastily put together last night to discuss this portion of their council meeting. And now we have had 12 hours for the town to absorb that and think about it. The voters spoke, that's clear, great, we want to move forward. We don't need to move forward in 3 weeks' time and get this thing pushed through. I certainly respect everyone that voted for that. But again, it's a non-binding question. There has been no vote on a charter amendment, and this legislation doesn't have a provision for a referendum. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. The chair will call Lynn Perkins. Is there Lynn Perkins? Good morning.
Good morning, thank you. Let me first say to you that I am the school board chairman for the town of Derry, and you've had 3 of my counterparts before you already. I am probably was voted on into this position, not as chair, but under the school board, because I am the cost crunching individual, that one unique person you may see on a board in any community. That being said, my obligation and sworn obligation is to defend that in the district of the uncertainty. And the uncertainty at this point comes from a loosely written document that's presented before you, of which is the central part of our discussions. The unclarity here is that we can have multiple interpretations of what this could mean, and part of that reason for it being multiply interpreted in different ways by legal counsel is because of the way the document is written. I believe that this really focuses on larger government, not local government, because for this loosely written document to be presented to you in the manner it has been done creates a level of uncertainty and unease for many, not just within the Derry School District or the Derry municipality, but for other communities across the state who have continued to suffer from a numbers crunch and higher taxes due to school funding. I think that's a concern that's echoed all across the state. I think we know that soundly, especially because of the amount of challenges that we see coming back into courts, challenging the formulas that are presented back and forth. what we have here is a vote that was supported by laymen. And the hearsay from back to me from the senator who has presented this to be put before everyone is that he cannot be responsible for the layman's lack of knowledge about what this actually means. To present to you the concerns of my board and the residents, which is what is this going to mean and where is this going to take us with some certainty. And so I would appeal to all of you, unless you can be assured of its certainty, to not allow this amendment to go forward. And to mirror Mr. McKenna, one of my associates, this is a bill that should be sorted out within the community, knowing a little bit more about where it's going to go and the discussions going further. Because of how quickly this bill has come about, the school district has not had an opportunity to properly vet this through legal counsel and get an exact determination on what this will mean going forward. So in the end, not in echoing back a minute ago what I had just said, you know, in what I would call the terror in a lot of communities about school funding, you are going to create, this could be the make or break. It could be a great path going forward if it's vetted a little more closely and we have some certainty. But unless you're absolutely sure, it could also be further disaster and compounding other issues within the courts of the state if you don't get this right, or if we don't get this right. And I'm all in favor, as I opened up with why and how I ended up on the school board. So I'm in support of some cost containment. But knowing that I support that, this document, this amendment, 1416S, is premature and too loosely written to know exactly the path it's going to take going forward. I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions?
Thank you all.
Seeing none, thank you. Representative Saporetto, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'll be quite brief. We're listening to Marcy's Law upstairs right now. And for the record, my name is Frank Saporetto, I represent Derry. And I'm my 7th term, and I was former chairman of the Taxpayer Association. And quite often we'd want to bring questions like this to the public. And I'm in support of the amendment, and I think the public should have a chance to vote on whether they want to or not. We've been surprised in the past by non-binding referendums in Derry. I think we've done about 3 or 4 of them over the past 20 years at the polls, and some have had some results that we were surprised about. But again, it's one of the ways that we are testing what the people want to do in Derry, and as you know, we're getting pretty big and overgrown, so I'd like to give the opportunity to most of the constituents to make that decision themselves.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Okay, the chair will call Paul Lutz.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Paul Lutz, and I'm speaking in opposition to this amendment. I have been a resident of the town of Derry for close to half a century. 47 of those years, I've served as a municipal employee, a member of the school district as an employee there, and an elected member of the Derry School Board. During that time, I've had the occasion to observe various changes in the town government, and the observations have already been made that Derry is a hybrid type of government. But it goes beyond that. I can recall when Derry was the only town, and probably will remain the only town in the state of New Hampshire, with a mayor. Wisely, that was changed, and the message behind that was that we did not, the town of Derry, the voters, did not want to head towards a city form of government. Now that may change at some point in time, but we no longer have a mayor. I remember when the legislature, the Great and General Court of the state of New Hampshire, legislated specific models for municipal governments. when the legislature realized that some towns were getting too big to efficiently operate under a general town meeting. So various models were set up. Derry adopted a model and made some tweaking to it. That was after lengthy and spirited discussions amongst the people in the town of Derry, all of whom had the opportunity to speak over and over again. That's not the case. I do not think that a municipal cable TV show constitutes reasonable substitution for a hearing in which legal notices are posted and a time and date, and there's a formal hearing process. Representative Dowling and I are on the exact same page except for one thing. We voted differently. And I think that that points out the confusion here. We have two people who voted differently, yet we had the exact same interpretation of this question. And that interpretation apparently is different than everybody else's interpretation of it. The wording was not clear. It was a non-binding advisory vote, a non-binding advisory question put before the voters that were there. Very simply. And I'll conclude with saying, I agree with Mr. Karen. I agree that we could have also had hearings before this. We could have done all those things. I will bring to your attention the fact that every member of this legislative body is elected by the people. Therefore, I would assume that every one of you have great faith in the representative form of government. And I understand that the vote that's before us is the representative form of government in its purest form. However, as Mr. Karen pointed out, all of those hearings would have included all that input before we got to this point. Now ask yourself, which is more democratic? Opening up the process to as many people as possible and taking the time to deliberate and analyze the effects of whatever is before the voters, or to exclude as many as possible, ram it through on a vote as quickly and with minimal, I will concede that some notification, with as minimal notification as possible. I ask you to ask yourselves, which is the more representative form of looking at this issue? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Okay, the chair will call Mary Ann Connors Krikorian. I'd like to remind you, Ms. Krikorian, we've gotten a lot of testimony this morning, so we're going to ask you if you have something new to offer, rather than repeat everything that's already been said. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Mary Ann Connors Krikorian, Superintendent of the Derry Cooperative School District. So I certainly will make this expeditious as possible. I understand that the non-binding referendum was well publicized, but to my knowledge, the amendment was not well publicized among our citizens of Derry. I am here to represent our students, staff, and families of Derry, our students who cannot speak today because they are in school. I believe there's simply a disconnect in the process, and I know we've spoken about the process, so I won't go into what I was going to say about the process. The process does appear to be hurried and rushed and non-collaborative. But I want to speak to that, why I want to speak to that is it's simply contrary to the meeting that was referred to by Mr. McKenna and Mr. Anderson. A couple of weeks ago, there was a joint meeting between the Town Council and the Derry School Board and our legislators. It was a meeting that promoted optimism, and a great optimism in our community. It was an opportunity for optimism that was on behalf of students, staff, and families in our entire community. And this amendment seems to certainly be the opposite of that optimism.
So I respectfully request that you do not allow this amendment to go forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. The chair will call Carrie Duggan. Again, Ms. Duggan, I'd like to remind you we've heard a lot of testimony this morning, and I'm going to ask you not to repeat testimony and offer us something new.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Carrie Dugan. I'm here as a Derry resident. I'm also a Derry parent, and I'm a full-time working mom, and I made it a priority to be here today because I don't want this amendment to move forward. Most of my concerns have already been expressed, and I do want to be respectful of your time, but I want to make sure that you are hearing the things that I have heard. As a citizen of Derry, I attended the town council meeting last night, and last night the words abruptly and rapidly were used by town council members when talking about how this amendment came to be. Town council said it was never their intent to move forward, as you heard Mr. McKenna say. So if rushing this was never intended, then why are we finding ourselves here today talking about an amendment that relates to building codes and energy conservation? Only 3 town council members viewed this amendment the same day it was submitted. Instead of putting a halt to this and discussing it with the entire town council, the decision was made to hastily move forward. Councilmember and Representative Chiricello, who has testified in favor of this, was one of those 3 councilors that viewed the amendment prior to its submission. Ironically, last night he told town council and citizens that he had expected to discuss this with the entire town council before moving forward, and that did not happen. Councilmember Tripp also said there were unanswered questions prior to moving forward. So if town council members had unanswered questions prior to moving forward, if they had concerns about how the amendment was worded and they were surprised that it moved forward so quickly, then it would be irresponsible of you to allow this to go any further. Town council did not give it the full consideration that it deserves. Town council also said last night that Derry residents are screaming for tax change. I'm not asking you to ignore the Derry vote. I'm asking you to give it the full attention that it deserves. Let me remind you that there were 547 people who did not want this to move forward. Before moving forward, those people deserve to have legislature put forward that is well thought out and a clearly detailed process where there are no unanswered questions and there is full transparency before any steps are taken to continue. I said this last night, I wrote this in letters, and I'll say it here again today. Public education is not an afterthought. By putting it in an amendment, our town council is treating it like one. And by pushing this forward, I believe you would be doing the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. The chair will call Barrett Christina. Good morning, Mr. Christina. I'm going to tell you the same thing. You're the last speaker, and so let's see if we can tie this all up, and please don't repeat things that we've already heard.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman Carson. Thank you, members of the committee. For the record, Barrett Christina from the New Hampshire School Boards Association. In opposition to the amendment, I'm not cogent or nearly educated enough to speak about the charter in Derry, but I want to talk a little bit about the process and what the non-binding resolution says and what the amendment says. As I read the non-binding question, are you in favor of petitioning the state legislature to obtain authorization? I haven't heard any testimony today that there has been a petition presented to the legislature. Presumably that has to come from the town council or some other process in Derry in order for the non-binding question to become effective, if you will. I know we have the amendment in front of us, but I think we're missing a step. The petition portion that the non-binding question particularly asked. The second point that I would like to make, again, not germane to the amendment per se, but to the issue at hand, when looking at the non-binding question, talks about voter-approved tax cap. There's already a provision in law in RSA 32 that allows voters to adopt and implement a tax cap without having to get through the charter question in Derry. So I think the amendment doesn't accurately reflect the process that the non-binding question requires, and nor does it accurately reflect some of the concerns that we've been raised about tax cap and tax rates and budgets and things of that nature. So that's the sum of my testimony, and HSBA is in opposition to this amendment, and we support the testimony offered by members of the Derry School Board.
Thank you very much for your testimony this morning. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Thank you, Madam
very
Chair.
much. Seeing that everyone who has signed up to speak. Who are you, ma'am?
Judy Strakalitis.
Yep, but you did not sign up to speak. If you would like to speak, please come forward and identify yourself for the record, but you did not sign up to speak.
Oh, is that a different box?
Yes, it is.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is my first time, obviously. Hi, I'm Judy Strakalitis. I'm a voter in Derry, and I just wanted to emphasize that there was a lot of confusion in Derry before the vote about what the wording meant, and it was very unclear. Different counselors offered differing interpretations of what it meant. But we were told, don't worry, trust us, this is going to be, we'll discuss, the town council is going to receive this information from the voters, and we'll make a decision whether to proceed or not. Whether the town council already was in favor of this process. So even if it was a pro forma discussion, I expected a discussion. I voted for it because I was told, if you want to explore change, do it. This is the way to do it. I actually was in favor of I thought we should consider becoming a city. I'm a supervisor of the checklist. We have 2,300 voters on our checklist. It's not, there's a reason that we're the biggest in the country, because its size isn't workable. As a city, things would be structured differently. So sorry, I lost my train of thought. But people were confused. So I thought I was already in favor of becoming a city, and I thought we should consider that. What the council said at their meetings in the fall and early winter was they wouldn't consider going through a charter commission because that process doesn't work. It does work, it just didn't produce the results the desired result. The last charter commission we had several years ago was initiated by a taxpayers group, and I think people here that were on that commission spoke about it. But it ended up not recommending a change to the form of government. And so this was the rationale for doing it through a referendum amendment, was we can get it through this way. I mean, through referendum, by petitioning the legislature, was to bypass the process that required the whole community to come together with a charter commission and vet it. So at the very least, I expected this was going to get a full hearing. This would be a standalone bill. It would get a hearing in the House by a committee that oversees municipal law, and then the same process in the Senate. This is bypassing all that, and it seems like an effort to ram it through, and I oppose that. I think that if you're creating a new form of government, it deserves to go through a full legislative process, because it doesn't just affect Derry. It's going to be every other town. Has an interest in whether this occurs or not. I think a new form of government deserves full consideration of that's what the role of the legislature is, and this is short-circuiting the legislative process.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from Ms. Strakalitis? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and close the public hearing on the amendment 2018, 2018-1416S.